Howdy, SupernovaBlade here with another Stories in History video. This one is probably going to be rather short, but I wanted to share this silly little story about something that happened earlier this year and how much fun it was, and it was too long to make a story time short out of, so I'm making it a short Stories in History video instead. Here is the story of the first time I went to a Maid Café. But first, before that, it's time to talk about the time lapses that are playing in the background for this volume. Just like the previous volume about the theater stories, the background are a few more reference sheets I'm doing to update my Unveil profile that I had finished after the previous volume and when I'm making this volume. As always, my Unveil profile is going to be provided in the description below. Anyway, onto the story, shall we? I have been introduced to the idea of maid cafes through various forms of Japanese media such as anime, like Akiba Maid War, never forget about that one, as well as watching some content creators on YouTube talk about going to some upon visiting Japan. But I never thought of myself ever going to one. But that would all change in the year of 2025, the current year I am releasing this video. See, I have been going to various conventions throughout my time of college, but once I graduated college, which was shortly before I released the history of my channel Stories in History video, I wanted to not stop going to conventions, and I was wanting to branch my horizons a little more and see what conventions were around my home state after I got home. While looking through the website, I found this convention in a district I remember my father driving to and from whenever we were driving to and from school and home, so I knew where I was going for this convention. Additionally, the convention was a first-year convention, so they were entering the sphere in the same way I was entering the independent con-goer sphere, even though I technically did something like that with MomoCon, which I already made a Stories in History video about. But since it was close and I found out since I hadn't graduated that when I bought my ticket I could get the continuing education badge, which would give me a bit of a discount, I did email them to see if it was possible to do that in a timely manner. And what they particularly said was, yes, even if you graduate by the time of the convention, you can still apply for the continuing education badge. So that's what I did. It was then later that the con announced another inclusion to the venue, a Maid Café. It would need a separate reservation ticket, but luckily I wasn't in that bad of a financial situation when it was occurring, so I decided, you know what, let's do it. And I bought the Maid Café ticket. This was about 2 weeks before the convention, by the way. But I bought my main ticket 3 months before the convention, so there was definitely quite a span of time between these two events. The convention was this past June. I bought the Maid Café ticket in late May and the regular ticket in early March. Upon doing some of the research, I found that this Maid Café was a primarily gaming-themed Maid Café that was highly prevalent throughout the region I'm from. Some people who know a bit about Maid Cafés in this area might know what Maid Café I'm talking about, but they were happy to collaborate with this Maid Café for its first year. Anyway, enough dilly-dallying about the preparation or whatever, time to talk about the experience of the Maid Café itself. When I was getting my ticket, I decided to book my reservation for 12 o'clock noon, assuming I would not be hungry until then, and I could get a bite to eat while at this Maid Café. I would find out this would actually be a relatively good thing for me to do because this convention hardly had any places where you could eat food. There were 3 reservations in total, and I would have had to buy separate tickets to go to all the other sessions just to see everything. And it was probably just going to be the same thing 3 different times. By the time I was going to the Maid Café, I had already been at the convention for a few hours and had already bought a few things from the artist alley and basically had been everywhere around the venue since the venue wasn't all that big. So I had quite a lot of time to make sure I was in line for this. I was in line by about 11:30, so I was rather early, but there was already a person in front of me despite it. Before long, a few more people joined me in the lines. We struck up some conversations. One of them went to me and said, "Hey, you were supposed to write your name on your badge." And prior to this point, I was wandering around the entire convention without my name on my name tag. So they just gave me a Sharpie that they just so happened to have in their bag, and I wrote my name on my badge and continued about my day. They also took a picture of me because they knew who I was dressed as, and then they posted it on Instagram. It was later found that the person in front of me didn't actually buy their ticket ahead of time like they were supposed to, so they unfortunately couldn't be verified and had to go to the back of the line. The Maid Café was also running a little bit behind schedule, so they couldn't get us in automatically. Eventually, when they were ready to open the doors, a bunch of the, I think, 10 or so maids all made 2 lines on each side and bowed as they welcomed the people into the cafe. And since I was the first one in, I got the most amount of maids welcoming me chanting, "Welcome, adventurers!" and they sent me over to the first table, and I read the menu and watched the other people, mostly people in cosplay, walk in and fill the remaining seats. My table had myself, some group cosplayers of Dungeon Meshi, some furries, some guy dressed as a character from Yakuza, and a few others I don't remember the cosplays of. Once everyone got in, all the different maids introduced themselves. Afterwards, they took our orders. I decided to get a slice of chocolate cake with some water, since I don't like lemonade or soda, and I like my orders rather simple. I got my food, and in the theming of the Maid Café, they would make a little decoration in the theming of our character, or a design of our choice. Since my cosplay was of Kaname Date from The Somnium Files, the maid who was dealing with the food from our table tried to make a drawing of Aiba made out of chocolate syrup, to varying degrees of success. But wait, we couldn't eat our food or drink our drinks yet. They needed to give a chant and give a power-up to our food and drink with magic dust or something like that, so that it'll be extra tasty and more filling or something like that. It was part of the gimmick, and I was all for it. The cake itself was very tasty, and the water was tasty, and I acted like I got a power-up upon consuming both. Again, to stay in the gimmick. After everyone had gathered in, everyone had eaten their food, some of the maids came to the stage on one of the sides of the room, and they sang some idol anime songs. The only one I remember off the top of my head was a song from Prepara, but I don't remember the title of it. Once they did their dances, we started to play some of the board games offered. Some tables played Jenga, some of them played a few other games. We settled on the game called Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. If you don't know what Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza is, it's a card game where each player gets some cards and each one of the 5 words in the title and an accompanying illustration is offered. Whoever starts the train says taco, and we keep saying Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza in that order, and you have to draw a card on the table. Whoever starts the train says taco, and then the next person says cat, and then goat, and then cheese, and then pizza. We gotta keep saying them in order while we draw a card, but if what we say corresponds with the card we draw on the table, every player has to slam their hand on the table. Whoever is the last to slam their hand on the table has to take all of the cards, and the round continues with whoever is next, starting with Taco. A player wins when they are officially out of cards. There are 3 special cards that, when played, the players have to do another action before they can slam their hand on the table. These 3 cards include Gorilla, where the players have to beat their chests and then slam their hand on the table, Groundhog, where each player has to slap both hands on the table and then hit them, and Narwhal, where each player has to make a horn with their hands and then slam their hands on the desk. The first person to run out of cards wins. So we played this game, we kept doing keep playing until there's only one person left. Luckily for me, not a single round was I the last person to slap on the table or do any of the special actions, so I almost never had to draw all the cards. But there was one part where I accidentally skipped Goat in one of the sessions, but the maid decided to not penalize me for that, and they just told me, just be more careful next time. And I didn't make that mistake again. After that round, the Yakuza guy was the last person with all the cards, and so because of that, he had to get hit in the head with a squeaky hammer that the maid had, which every maid just so happens to have a squeaky hammer available. Again, part of the gimmick. After that, she asked if anyone else wanted to hit Yakuza dude with a squeaky hammer, and I volunteered that I would do it as well. So, here I am, dressed up as Kaname Date, with a squeaky hammer, hitting the head of a guy from Yakuza. Again, I forgot which character from Yakuza he was dressed as, but he was dressed as a Yakuza character. This is the crossover that we didn't ask for, but we got. I acted all innocent at first, but deep down, I was not going to be gentle, even though the maid was also not being gentle. So I gave him that second hit on the head with the squeaky hammer, and then I gave it back to the maid. By this point, it was time for closing remarks and the availability for photo ops and other souvenirs at a back table for people to purchase if they had wanted to. Since I'm not a super talkative or social person, I went to purchasing both a photo of some of the maids, which I didn't have a preference which maid I got my picture taken with, and some trading cards featuring some of the maids from the company. And here's the picture I took of myself and these maids, just with my face censored. Afterwards, we got our stuff and left and went back to doing our regular stuff at the convention. But I can't deny that I had so much fun at this Maid Café, and I would love to go back to one in the future. When I got back home, my siblings didn't recognize me at first because I was still in the wig, but I sent my sister the pictures of the maids for dopamine purposes since she's really into that kind of thing, and I started following the Maid Café on Instagram to get latest updates on their content. I would later find out that one of the sessions that I didn't go to, they performed ice cream, and I was rather annoyed that it was at one of the ones that I didn't go to. Because those who know me well would know I can be absolutely insufferable when it comes to talking about Love Live, and I will not stop. I mean, they couldn't not do it. One of the maids was literally named Maid Ruby, even though it was spelled with an I and not a Y. But my point still stands. And that's basically all there is to the story of my first visit to a maid cafe. I surely had a fun time with this visit to a maid cafe, and I hope to go to plenty more in the future. So this is where I'm going to be ending the video. If you enjoyed this kind of content, be sure to give the video a like, a comment, or subscribe if you so fit. Anyway, this has been SupernovaBlade, and goodbye.